Greetings everyone, this is Professor Theo. It's the second video. I had a welcome video that hopefully you've already viewed. This is a brief video going over the syllabus for this semester for intercultural communication online. You can find this syllabus on Canvas, but I want to walk you through it. That way if you had any questions, that maybe I can answer some of those questions through this particular video. If not, feel free to email me with any questions or concerns you may have. As you can see on the syllabus, my email address, that's the best way to get a hold of me. You can shoot me an email and I'll get back to you as promptly as I can. And if you ever need to talk, you can call me at 574-807-7392. And if you're already on campus, that would just be extension 7392. There is no textbook for this particular course, technically speaking, as far as I didn't require you to buy one, but there is a textbook that I used to create the PowerPoints and to create the online lectures. So the key is just to make sure you download those MP3s, listen to the lecture, download those PowerPoints, and you can probably bring those PowerPoints up. You can print them out, have them on your computer, and you can flip through them as I lecture, and it's going to be just like if you were in class. All right? So I'm not going to take time to read the course description or the course goals and objectives, but I really want to focus on the course requirements. In other words, how do you get the points for this particular class? And all this is outline your syllabus. The first opportunity to get some points is going to be your online introduction. This is going to be found in Canvas. You just go on, log on to the class, and you're going to see an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to the class. And there's a couple questions I ask you. Simply who you are, tell us a little about yourself, as well as any background you may have in terms of intercultural communication. Is this your first experience with that? Do you have a lot of experiences, good experiences, bad experiences? Just going to briefly introduce yourself to the class. That's going to be worth 10 points. All right? The first major assignment is the Who Am I Cultural Identity paper. This is worth 150 points, and I've taken the liberty of outlining the whole paper in your syllabus. So if you download the syllabus, which is found under syllabus, click on syllabus, it's going to open up, double tap it, download it to Word. It outlines exactly everything that should go in this paper. There's basically 3 sections. Section number 1 is going to deal with the different cultural identities that you would say that you belong to. One thing we're going to learn in this class is when it comes to culture, we're all multicultural. Don't just look at culture in terms of race, but it's also your gender, your religion, your family upbringing. Maybe you're all students, that's a particular culture. If you're athletes, that's a particular culture. If you're from the Midwest, that's a particular culture. From the East Coast, the West Coast, down south, all those are cultures. Maybe you grew up in a small town, that's a particular culture. Maybe you're the only child, that's a particular culture. Maybe some of you are parents, so you have children. That's a particular culture as being parents. So we're going to learn about different types of cultures. And what you're going to do in this paper is you're going to focus on 3 or 4 of the cultural identities that make up who you are. For example, if I were to do this paper, I may talk about being a man, being African American, being a Christian, being a husband, or I could talk about being a former athlete, a poet, a pastor. All those are cultural. So I want you to pick 3 to 4 different cultures that you want to highlight. That's what you're going to do in section 1. You're going to simply tell us what those cultures are. In section 2, you're going to talk about the cultural norms or the stereotypes that may be associated with those cultures. In other words, what does it mean to be a man? What are some of the social norms, some things that we expect from men? What are some stereotypes of what it means to be a man? Then I would do the same thing for being black. What does it mean to be black? What are some of the social norms? What are some of the stereotypes? Same thing for Christian, same thing for husbands. And then that's section 2. Now you're taking each of those cultural identities and you're dealing with the social norms, and we're going to talk more about what norms are later in the class, and you're dealing with some of the stereotypes. So what do people say about Christians? What do people say about black people? What do people say about men? What have we come to expect from athletes? Those would be the social norms and stereotypes. That's section 2. And then finally, section 3 would be you dealing with how do the social norms and the stereotypes of one particular culture that you identify with, how do they complement the social norms and stereotypes of one of your other cultures? For example, in what ways is being a Christian similar to being a man? What have I learned about being black that I've also learned about in regards to being a husband? What are some of the ways they complement each other? But then I also want you to deal with the ways in which they conflict each other. So is there something that I've learned about what it means to be a man, or is there a stereotype about what it means to be a man that contradicts what it means to be a Christian, or that contradicts what it means to be a husband? And so you're going to deal, number 1, section 1, with who you are, those cultural identities. Section 2 would be what are the norms and stereotypes associated with those cultural identities. And then number 3, how do those cultural identities, those norms, those stereotypes, how do they complement one another, and how do they contradict each other? And of course, since it's a paper, I would encourage you to start off with an introduction that introduces the topic. Don't just jump right in, but draw the reader in with a creative introduction, and then recap or creatively close out the paper with your conclusion. I would encourage you to write all these papers in APA form. If you have any questions about what that is, feel free to ask me, or you could just Google APA guidelines, especially on Purdue OWL. I won't require that you do an abstract for your papers, but I would require a title page, then the paper, and if there happens to be any references, a works cited page. But you won't need any reference for this first paper. All right, so that's paper number 1. That's worth 150 points. Next, you're going to have the intercultural interview. This is a class favorite. You're going to pick someone from a culture different than your own, and you're going to interview that person. And I have an interview guide that I've taken the liberty to upload on Canvas under files. You can use that guide. I think it's a great guide, but you can also add some questions to it. You can take some questions out and add some of your own questions. And so you have liberty about what you want to do. But the key thing is to pick someone who has an obvious culture that you can highlight, especially someone who has an obvious culture different than yours. And then the questions that you ask should really get to the heart of what it means to be a part of that culture. So maybe you're someone who's fairly young. Maybe you're in your 20s. And you want to interview someone who's in their 80s or 90s, and you want to talk about the cultural difference of being born in that time period. Maybe you're someone who is originally from America, and you want to interview someone who's from another country. Or maybe you're in America and you're white, and you want to interview someone who's Hispanic or Latino. Maybe you're a Christian, and you want to interview someone who's a Muslim or a Hindu. And so, or things of that nature. The one I would avoid would be gender. So if you're a woman and you interview someone simply because they're a man, I think you know enough about men to where you wouldn't really get a whole lot of stuff out of that. So it's not just simply doing the assignment. I want the assignment to be challenging in the way that you learn something new about a culture that you didn't previously know a lot about, and something that others could benefit. So if it's simply interviewing someone of the opposite sex, you can get some insight, but I think you would be better suited picking someone of a different race, different religion, different age group, maybe someone from a different country. That way you're getting outside your comfort zone, and maybe they perhaps get outside their comfort zone also. This is going to be worth 150 points. It's due February the 15th. What I would encourage you to do is not wait to the last minute to schedule or complete your interview, but try to get that scheduled as soon as you can, complete it as soon as you can, and then put it to the side, and you can work on the paper later. But what you don't want to do is say to yourself, I'm going to schedule this a week before, and I'll interview the person. If something comes up, if they have to cancel, also now you're scrambling to try to find a replacement. So at the very least, let the person know who you're thinking about interviewing. Let them know ahead of time, that way you can get them on the schedule and try to get that taken care of as soon as you can. I would suggest you record the interview on your phone, audio or video. That way, during the actual interview, you won't have to be jotting down any answers. You can just be tuned into the interview. All right, that's also going to be worth 150 points. It's not going to be a transcript of the interview, so what you're turning in isn't, here's the question, here's the answer. Here's the question, here's the answer. No, you're going to take those questions and those answers and you're going to put it into a paper form. You're going to say, I interviewed this person, we talked about this, here's some of the things that they talked about. And for the most part, it's going to be you taking their words and you paraphrase them. You put them in your own words. Now, if they happen to say something super profound, yeah, add that quote them word for word. But I would suggest you try to stay away from super long quotes. What I don't want to see is, I asked this person that, and then you have this 50-word quote in quotation marks, and then you do that over and over. I want you to put those words in your own words and only quote them if they say something that you think is very relevant, but even then, keep the quotes to short quotes. All right, and we can talk more about that at a later date. Lastly, so those are the two major assignments. You got that, like I said, that introduction worth 10 points, the Who Am I paper worth 150 points, the interview worth 150 points, and then you have quizzes. If we were in class, maybe we can do a few sessions and have an exam, but since we're not in class, we're gonna have a quiz. There's no quiz the first week. The first week, you're gonna be reading chapter 1. And in this case, you're gonna be looking over the PowerPoints of chapter 1, and you're gonna listen to the MP3s of chapter 1. And then you're gonna take a quiz starting the following week on chapter 1. So the way it works is 1 week we deal with the chapter. For that full week, we're dealing with the chapter. Then the following week is when the quiz opens on a Monday, and you'll have until Sunday to complete that quiz. So it's important that you remember that. So when you go to take quiz number 1, you be like, well, I studied chapter 2 and 3, and I wasn't prepared because none of the questions dealt with chapter 2 and 3. Well, yeah, because the quiz is over the previous week's work. So we deal for 1 week of reading. The very next week, we're at a quiz. So there's no quiz the first week. The quiz is during the second week, but it's over the material from the first week, if that makes sense. And then every week, once we start that process, you're gonna have 5 quizzes in a row, with the exception of the final week. And so each quiz, like I said, it opens up on a Monday night, and you'll have until that following Sunday to complete the quiz. I think there's each quiz I give you, it's either 40 to 45 minutes to complete. You can do open book, you don't have a book, but open notes. You can have your PowerPoints there in front of you. But although you have the PowerPoints in front of you, I would encourage you to study for the full week for the quiz. Don't just say, well, since I get to use my notes, there's no need for me to study. I'm just gonna start the quiz and then pull out my notes and do it. You won't have time to do it that way. Your notes should be to help you out when you get stuck. Don't use your notes as a crutch, but use them as a support. So I think that's gonna be very important. Because once the quiz starts online, you will see a timer. And once that timer runs out, the quiz is done. And so don't start the quiz until you feel you're prepared. And so if the quiz opens up on Monday, hey, feel free to take it up on Monday. But feel free to wait till Friday. Study as many days as you can and then take the quiz so you're most prepared. And you're gonna have 5 quizzes, each worth 20 points for a total of 100 points. Then the last way to get points is through the online discussion. So each week, once we start reading, so not this week the online would be you posting your introduction, but starting the following week, there will be a online discussion. There's normally gonna be 1 question that I'll ask you over that particular chapter that we're covering. And you're gonna be required to post an initial response to that question by Wednesday of each week. So those questions will, you'll see the question on Sunday. By Wednesday, you post your initial response. I'm asking for a minimum of 250 words. Now I'm not going to cut and copy the words to see if you got 250. I'm going to eyeball it. So I'm asking for a pretty nice response. If it's a short response, you're going to lose points. And when you give that response is going to be worth 10 points. So if you give it and it meets the requirements as far as the word count, you get 10 points. Then that's by Wednesday. Then before Sunday or by Sunday, you have to respond to at least 2 classmates. Now your response doesn't have to be 250 words. Your response can be anywhere from 100 to 150 words. So it's a shorter response, and you're simply chiming in based upon what they responded. And so for each response, if you meet the word count or if you're close to it, you'll get 5 points for a total of 10 extra points. And so you end up having 20 points per week that you can get. 10 for your initial response and 10 for the 2 subsequent responses. If you only do 1 subsequent response, you get 15 total points. 10 for yours and then 5 for the other one. If you don't respond to any classmates, you're at 10. If you don't do anything, then you're at 20. And those points add up. So what I would say, make sure you're posting on time, make sure you're responding to your classmates, and make sure you're doing that on time also. And when you do that for the full time, it's going to be worth a total of 140 points. So the quick recap, you have 10 points for your initial introduction, 150 points for that Who Am I paper, 150 points for your interview, a total of 100 points worth of 5 quizzes, and then 140 points worth of online discussions. All right? And so what I'll do is I'll chime in more about each assignment when we get to that. But if you have any questions, feel free to email me also. Take care and God bless. This has been Theo Williams with this video over the syllabus. Talk to you soon.